The Elizabeth Line, a modern railway for a modern London. Featuring the latest technological advancements and modern station designs, the Elizabeth Line is the very definition of a railway for the future. Well, not quite, as the Elizabeth Line still operates a portion of its route using 40-year-old Class 315 trains, which date from the late 1970s and early 80s. As such, I produced this video to have a look at these trains and see just how they compare to their successors. So, without further ado, it's time to get this show on the rails. Our journey begins on a very cold winter afternoon from Shenfield Station on the Great Eastern Main Line. Shenfield is a major hub for Great Eastern Main Line suburban services between London, Essex and the East Anglia, and is also the eastern terminus of the Elizabeth Line branch between Liverpool Street and Shenfield. In terms of shops for eateries and light refreshments, there only appeared to be a newsagent. There is also a ticket kiosk, as well as ticket machines in the station. The station has a total of 6 platforms, all of which are linked via an underground subway system. The station itself is managed by Greater Anglia, who also provide the majority of the station services. The Elizabeth Line, however, runs every 10 minutes between Liverpool Street and Shenfield, and is extended to 5 in the peak hours. Perhaps the most notable feature of the station is the Shenfield Shark stored by Platform 1, which is an abandoned wagon that has been there for as long as I can remember. And right on cue, here comes our unit, ready to take us on to Liverpool Street. Wait, where's it going? Basically, the unit is operating an empty coaching stop movement between Aldersbrook carriage sidings and Shenfield. Although first, it reverses into Shenfield sidings, so there's no need to panic, we will still be catching this train today. It's also worth noting that this footage was recorded back in the TfL rail days. However, these trains can still be found on Elizabeth Line services to this day, albeit with a number of small changes which we will look at in due course. We will be departing at 15:32 today, with a journey time of around 43 minutes. Our scheduled arrival time into Liverpool Street is 4:15. No, this is not a false alarm this time, we are actually catching the service now as it comes to a halt to prepare to take us onto Liverpool Street. We will be calling at quite a few stops today, as this is an all-stopper to Liverpool Street. These services will eventually link with the Elizabeth Line core, this sometime in autumn 2022. But anyways, that's enough talk for now. It's now time for us to board our unit and take a look around. Our walkthrough begins from the rear of the train, and as can be seen, the seating arrangement is the 2+3 configuration, which is typically found on metro and stopping services throughout the country. Unsurprisingly as well for trains dating from the 1980s, doors are opened manually between the carriages. The second carriage is set up in a similar configuration, however there is a larger space for wheelchair users, which is pretty good considering how old these trains are, and it's great to see them being brought up to modern day standards for those with reduced mobility. The third carriage is more or less the same layout as the first carriage, although there are slightly more spaces for those with high priority. And our final carriage is exactly the same. You'll be pleased to know as well there aren't any toilets on board, so that does make things a lot simpler when doing the review. Well, anyways, that's it from me. Guess it's time for me to take my seat and hit the iron road. So, off to Liverpool Street. Let's go. Just over a few minutes later, we find ourselves arriving into Brentford Station in Essex. Brentford is not only notable as being one of the most recent additions to Zone 9 on the London travel card system, but is also one of 3 to be included in Zone 9, the others being Amersham and Chesham on the Metropolitan line. This took effect upon takeover of the Shenfield metro services by TfL from Greater Anglia in 2015. Well, in the meantime, whilst we get through the remaining stations, I guess it's time for a Know Your Seat. Whilst the seat maquette was topped up in 2015, the seats themselves are still the same as they were back in the 1980s, and as such, they are well padded but at the same time quite firm. The trains also have windows which you can open next to each seat, which is a necessity considering there is no air conditioning on these trains, like the new Class 345s which replace them. On both the windows and the doors, there are labels, although the windows are a lot less confusing compared to the doors, as honestly there is no risk of death or injury when moving through the train. Grab poles are also present throughout the train, many of which come from the train seat, which is pretty useful considering the metro nature of these trains and how crowded that they get during peak hours. Prior to the introduction of the Elizabeth Line brand, the trains featured TfL rail maps from the route between Liverpool Street and Shenfield, although upon rebrand from the Elizabeth Line, as you previously saw, the trains are now unbranded externally, but internally they now have Elizabeth Line maps showing the full route between Shenfield and Abbey Wood in the east to Heathrow Airport and Reading in the west. Right now, there is currently walking signs between Paddington and Liverpool Street, although this will likely change when the core links up in autumn and the trains are finally replaced for good. As we continue to power down the Great Eastern Main Line, with the gorgeous sunset in the background accompanying us, it's worth noting that the maximum line speed is 100 miles an hour, although this is on the fast lines. As we're on a stopping service, we're restricted to the slow line speed, and the Class 315 75 mile an hour speed limit means that 63 miles an hour is actually pretty good going for this train. A few stops later, we find ourselves arriving into Gidea Park and returning into travel card Zone 6. Gidea Park is a notable station as, when the Elizabeth Line core links to the Shenfield branch, a few limited services from the mainline station in Liverpool Street will continue to run to Gidea Park on a limited stop basis during peak hours. There are also stabling sidings located here for stabling of the Elizabeth Line stock. Shortly after leaving Gidea Park, we find ourselves approaching our next stop of Romford. Not only can you interchange with limited Greater Anglia services here, on the platform to the left you can interchange for the Romford to Upminster line operated by London Overground, which is arguably one of London's shortest railways, with a total of 2 stops, a journey time of around 9 minutes, and a distance of around 3 miles. The line is also one of the few to be contained entirely in Zone 6 and links the Great Eastern Main Line services with the London, Tilbury and Southend services to Shoebury Ness and Southend Central. Shortly after departing Seven Kings, we come across Ilford EMU depot, which is where heavy maintenance on the Elizabeth Line fleet used on the Shenfield branch is conducted. Heavy maintenance is also conducted on Greater Anglia's suburban fleet, as well as London Overgrounds, as we can see to the right. The depot was previously managed by Bombardier Transportation prior to their purchase from Alstom in 2020. We can also see another Class 315 in the background undergoing maintenance in the sidings, and as I'm sure you'll agree, the Class 315s are in such a good condition and are truly a credit to the depot. Another point to note is that heavy refurbishment programs are undertaken at the depot, such as the Avanti West Coast Class 221 Super Voyager refurbishment, which I will be having a look at very soon, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the video. Not long after departing Ilford Station itself, we can see Aldersbrook carriage sidings to the left, where during the day and on the weekends, the Class 315 fleet is stabled. Although, as can be seen, there aren't any there, purely because the one we're currently on now is in service. There is another pair in service, and a third pair is currently at Ilford Depot undergoing maintenance, as we just saw earlier. Our view of the sidings is enabled thanks to the Ilford flyover, which dates back to 1939 when the line between Liverpool Street and Shenfield was electrified. This enabled the slow line trains to be switched with the fast line trains, in order to enable the electric trains used on the Shenfield route to enter their depot of Ilford for maintenance. The gargantuan Westfield shopping centre in the background can only mean that we are arriving into Stratford, our penultimate stop before Liverpool Street. Stratford is not only a major hub for Greater Anglia's Great Eastern Main Line and limited West Anglia mainline services, it is also a hub for the Central Line and the Jubilee Line as part of the London Underground, as well as the North London line served by the London Overground, and DLR services to destinations such as Canary Wharf and Woolwich Arsenal. It's worth noting as well that Stratford International is located a few short minutes away from here, which serves southeastern high-speed services into Kent and beyond. Leaving Stratford, we have a full view of the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, as well as the Olympic Stadium, which was formerly used for the Olympic Games themselves, although these are now used as the grounds for West Ham United. Shortly afterwards, we find ourselves on the section of track to enter the Elizabeth Line core. However, we will not be doing this today, as not only do the Class 315s lack the necessary signalling to enter the tunnels, at the time of recording, Elizabeth Line, or TfL Rail as you'd like to call them, services from Shenfield did not serve the core section of the line until late 2022. Right, conclusions. Overall, I'd have to say that this train is basically what it says in the tin. A simple people mover, designed specifically for metro services, such as the Shenfield branch on the Elizabeth line. As such, it is rather basic and contains very minimal features, such as no plug sockets nor toilets, although I would argue that it is not necessary for a route as short as that. But overall, I would say that for a metro train, they are relatively comfortable, and they do offer a rather pleasant ride, I must say. Although the Class 345s replacing them are a more modern and welcome change. Nevertheless, these trains have served London and the East Anglia well over the past 40 years, and continue to do so on the Elizabeth line to this day, and as such, it will be sad to see them go when they are eventually fully replaced on the Elizabeth line, when the Shenfield branch eventually links to the core section. Well, anyways, that's it from me for now. So, welcome to London Liverpool Street.
We are now approaching London Liverpool Street, where this train terminates. Please ensure you have all of your belongings with you. If you require assistance.
Whilst I do have a few more things to say on the Class 315s, in the meantime, I really do hope you've enjoyed the video today. If you did, please do give it a like, as well as share it, as that really does help the channel to grow. If you did enjoy the video and would like to see more content such as this, why not consider subscribing, as well as enabling notifications, as I am now publishing new videos every Friday at 5 PM. A bit more interesting information about the Class 315s. The Class 315s, prior to being operated by TfL Rail, later the Elizabeth line, were all formerly operated by Greater Anglia, with a total of 61 sets being used for the operators Shenfield Metro and Lee Valley Line suburban services on the West Anglia Main Line. When the trains retire, the Class 315 Preservation Society is anticipated to preserve one of the units. A nice note to end the video on is that on one of my trips on the trains, a driver let me inside the cab to have a look around, and it is quite a nice little view when looking at platform 17 from Liverpool Street. As a bonus, here's the Class 315 next to its successor, the Class 345. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!